Welcome to Draw Process. I'm Ike. I'm going to draw a comic book page and share my thoughts and techniques along the way. Today it is page 24 of episode 2 of my comic First Sun and Sword. We are 84 episodes in, if I remember correctly. Getting closer and closer to 100. What a benchmark. And we're over a year in. I do about one a week. So, going on 2 years as well. It doesn't feel like it's been that long. This series is substantially for the purpose of cataloging my process of development. I end up sharing it, not only the techniques I do, the way that I approach the page or certain, elements or pieces of the process, but my own approach to the creative process and to juggling life while drawing, a pretty full, busy life while keeping a art form and practice going. So I try to talk about every bit of it, and it functions kind of like a diary, and that I can go through, and anyone could, but I could go through and look at old entries and see how I've changed over time. I think I haven't been doing as much of that as I should. I think it's a much neglected part of all of our development to not just be in the moment working towards an immediate goal, but to set really long-term goals and to be able to look at the past, have a story, have a picture of where you were, where you are, and where you're going. To fill everything with meaning. It's going to make it more enjoyable, more engaging, more your life. I mean, how many times have I drawn a page or lived a day? And I only get so many of those. And live a day and then it didn't mean anything, except I got to mark, some things off the to-do list. I can imbue it with meaning when I pay attention and provide myself with continuity, with a sense of who I was, who I am now, where I was, where I'm going. So this series really lets me do that. Yeah, and that way I think it's more useful to me than to anyone else. I guess that's one thing I can say to, everyone out there. Consider how you can do that for yourself. I've held on to every physical page of comic page that I've drawn. And now I don't know why I've done it. I've made them available for sale now, but I don't advertise it or make any big deal out of it. So I don't think I've sold any of them yet. And for the longest time, I didn't want to sell any of them at all. And even now, I don't really care if they sell. But, and part of me wants to keep them. But I think I was partly holding on to everything because I wanted to feel like I existed. Like I wanted to feel like I could sort of own that this is where I was and now I'm going somewhere. This is the stack that I've done. And this is how I used to draw. Like I wanted to create that sense of continuity, but my point is trying to create that through stuff you own and that sits on the shelf is a cheap imitation of doing it for real. Like it's a poor way of doing it, and we're looking for that from keeping those old pages, for example, those old sketchbooks on my shelf. But if I don't look at them, if I don't revisit them, if I don't make sense of them, then then they're kind of worthless there. At least on the shelf, I could do that someday, right? At least you could do it someday, but it's better to do it perpetually. Like build the story over time, not just be lost in the desert for a year and then come back and compare it to where you were a year before. So I want to do more of that, going back and paying attention to that and that development over time. I might even do it with the way I think about things. Like the ideas and thoughts I share on here about life and the artistic process for me. How I'm thinking about the purpose of my art, or how I schedule it and handle it and so on. Curious to see what I think about that, about what I see as important, or how I frame even the marketing and business of it, which I don't talk too much about because I think it's for the best that I don't put much energy into that. But I'd like to revisit the ways I've thought before and that I've conveyed in these videos, as which to me is like a journal entry, a diary, so I can go back, see what I was thinking, and maybe I can share some of that here. Things that I am building an understanding of from looking back, things that insights I might gain from that, I'd like to share here. I guess one of the things I can reflect on is this continual process of getting more natural, organic, feeling free, just a real freedom with drawing, just drawing the page. I don't even thumbnail anymore. I don't really do much construction or reference and things. I just get to draw it on the page. It's very much cartooning. In the same vein, I am, doing every bit of drawing and inking is becoming more and more one thing. It's not like I thumbnail and then pencil and then ink, and each one is a real separate looking thing. I build the thumbnail into the pencils and build the pencils into the inks, and the inks even are a drawing in themselves. They're building on the pencils. They're not simply tracing them. So they're becoming one whole thing, and it's not broken into pieces. It's smooth. It's organic. It transitions naturally. It's trying to find different ways of describing this, but I'm really moving this direction, and I can look at earlier work I've done and see when I would use blue pencils and be very soft and careful with it, and I would ink more carefully to have a small number of lines more carefully placed. It was pretty. It was pretty. I appreciate it now. I can look at it and even wonder if I should do a little more of that. But I know this is the primary path I need to go down. This drawing at liberty. it feels the best, and it looks natural and alive. I appreciate how it looks. I appreciate how it communicates emotion and things like that. So when I look at the first pages of First Sun and Sword, really, even when I started that, it was after, let's see, the last comics I did before that were the two sci-fi comics, Link Invalid and We Are Inside a Worm. With Link Invalid, I was quite a bit more careful with, and it was much more stylized in the inks. And then when I got to We Are Inside a Worm, it was much more humorous to me. It was much more carefree, and I let it get looser than the one before, and I like it a lot more. And I appreciate even how it looks. I think I like that more too. So I was loosening up, and I think I was aware of it. It wasn't just because it was a funnier story. I just felt like loosening up. I thought, why be so uptight about this? Like it doesn't matter, you know. And then when I came into First Sun and Sword, my thought was, I really just want to get more free than ever. I want to get, simpler than ever. But see, the simpler word, like this is getting, what I'm doing right now is actually more lines. It's more sketchy. So it's not really simpler, but it's more free. And so I at first I wasn't going so much for this kind of freedom. It was just blockier drawings, simpler lines, higher contrast, like shadowed areas and light. Especially in the starting scene when we're in the desert and it's just a big bug and it's these three characters jumping around fighting. It was simple. It was a simple environment that wasn't hard for me to do in that way. But then when I moved in the city and I started going into scenes where there's so many characters and things happening, even in that first issue, I'm just becoming more and more organic. Like I'm drawing less and less stylistically. Like my figures, Sword's head and his beard and stuff, like just drawing them a little bit more naturally and organically, like a person would look, makes it easier to reproduce at any angle in complicated situations. I can just draw from my visual library, my understanding of reality, of nature, instead of from my own abstractions of it that are harder to produce, and from all these different angles and everything. So as I got into the story and it got more complicated, what I had to convey, the environments and the amount of figures and so on, it started moving more and more towards organic shapes rather than blocky, and being a little bit sketchier, a little more like this. And then especially when I transitioned to the nib, I've really been moving more this direction because it feels like the inking is more like drawing to me. It's more sketchy in a way. So yeah, this is the developmental path here. And I'm not quite sure what's next, honestly. And then, I'll get to go back and listen to this video and see if I was right. I've got two predictions, I guess, possibilities I see. I could move towards greater detail being conveyed, like folds in clothing and like capes and texture and, wrinkles in skin, hair. I could go into almost, in a sense, greater detail, more lines, more sketchy, convey more. while tightening up or simplifying the compositions a bit. I could go that direction. Or I could move towards getting more cartoony, like simplifying more in a way. Like less lines in a way, like more lines in the place I want you to look, like in more of the focal points, and then let the lines disappear more. Kind of like if someone inked like a forest, you're not drawing every leaf on the trees. You're letting them kind of fade away as they get like further from you. This kind of, fading, less detail in places. I might move further that direction, unfinished background pieces and stuff around figures. Yeah, so maybe a bit of both, but yeah, we'll see. I don't think I'm moving towards more stylistic figures. Like, I think the word I should say is stylized, honestly, rather than stylistic. But figures that are more abstracted from like natural proportions, just to be more interesting. And I sure love artists that do that, like to not draw bodies to be in the proportion of natural human bodies, but in interesting ways, beautiful proportions in interesting ways. I don't think I'm moving that direction because that's hard to do when you are doing physical environments, when you're doing what I'm doing, and it's not just drawing a figure, it's drawing an entire world, panel after panel, from different angles, with continuity. It gets really hard to do if you're not dealing with natural shapes, because if I'm dealing with the shapes I've made up in my mind, then I'm probably going to have a hard time remembering them. And I guess if you draw all the time and you practice it and it's just like your style, maybe there's a way. But it seems harder to me to remember than for me to just picture a person and just draw a person. And it's still going to be somewhat stylistic because I'm, I have an imperfect, kind of quirky view of people and things. But as I continue to study anatomy and everything in the world, I'm probably going to have figures and backgrounds and everything that's just moving closer and closer to a sort of realism, like realistic proportions at least. So I feel like that's happening. And I see that from, the first few pages of First Sun and Sword, episode 1, where I was letting Sword's head look like this big, rectangle thing. What else have I done? It's been a long time coming, but I use shadow more to convey form and less simply for lighting, to convey depth on figures rather than strictly for lighting. What else can I say? Am I struggling a bit? This video, I don't feel that I have as much I want to say as I usually do. It's my own fault. I've set myself up with a busy schedule, and I compromised, made some choices that led to doing this voiceover late the night before the video needs to be posted. I'm trying to hold myself to that deadline. It's kind of like the idea of like, if I'm going to stay up late, at least still get up at the same time every day so that I can hold that line rather than insisting on going to bed at the same time. I at least have to get up at the same time. And that sort of forces me into going to bed at the same time. Same thing with this. Like, I don't want to let it slide. I had a week, I think it was last week, that the video was a little late getting posted. Like, it was the same day. I don't know, 4 hours late or something. But even there, I am letting the goalpost move a bit, and I'm letting myself slack. And so I don't want to open up to that. Like, this video needs to go out on time. Sunday morning for me, my time zone. So I got to get it done. And it usually serves me pretty well. If I'm not totally exhausted or sick or something, I usually think of things to say and have the energy to do it. But I'm sitting in a kind of stuffy room, and there's been worrisome sounds outside that I had to go inspect and pause the video for, and like cats meowing outside the door and kids and stuff. So, yeah, like, sometimes it's a little more distracting than usual, and I'm a little less comfortable or clear-headed than usual. And that it does feel like today's one of those days where I'm not at my best, at least when it's time to hit record. Yeah, so is this a fluke, or is this a sign that I've been letting myself slide? I'm not living as I should. I'm not sure, because in a lot of ways I feel like my life is better. I'm more disciplined, and things are on track more than they were before. I'm working more hours, and that's one of the problems. That's I've had a hard time finding the time to record this video because my work is just very full. But yeah, I had a few nights of staying up late, but that was to spend time with my wife. It was like I wanted to do that after a long work day, but I wanted, and that too, that's part of it too, working more than 12 hours, honestly, on Thursday. I wanted a little downtime. So, that'll make me tired, but it's like, I'm going to catch up on that sleep. It wasn't like I'm totally falling apart. It was just a couple days like that. So I don't think this will be a pattern. I think I can get back to recording, at better times and being disciplined, and even drawing with discipline. 'Cause when it comes to not sleep so much, I guess, but when it comes to my eating and my schedule, I'm getting much more disciplined. Which is another reason I have less time for these videos. Is I'm not cheating as much, like I talked about last week. I'm doing what I should be doing when I should be doing it, which means there's not time to do this, to squeeze it in. And that's a good thing until it's not. So, I think I'm still on track. So I hope this is a fluke, and next week going forward, I can start to do well with plenty of wind in my sails. One thing I guess I could say here, I'm looking at how I'm drawing this figure from these rougher pencils. The way that I used to draw with the micron pens and with less lines on the page and with a little bit more blocky shapes, that doesn't convey as much what things are made of, the material. So like if you get a more organic line going, you're able to communicate, that it's fabric and not human skin a little better. Or, if it's tight or looser fabric, but it communicates it better. Just the line with a little bit of, it looks like laces or stitching on the front of this guy's shirt on the panel on the left. And like some of the creases in his fabric. I'm not doing a bunch of it. It's not heavily done. But just the quality of the line and the outline of the shirt in this case, let's say, And then it's the quality of the line, the placement of it, and the shadow work, like where I've placed shadows, I'm able to accentuate some of the folds in the clothing. But that communicates more than the way I used to draw, or the way I used to ink pages would communicate. And I'm trying to do that, but not too much of it. Like, again, I like my simpler, more heavy black style. So I want to be able to communicate that without a whole lot of inking techniques. Let's say cross-hatching and feathering and stuff. So, I don't often do a grid, just a very symmetrical grid like this, but it's not perfectly symmetrical. The first two panels are larger, and there's only 6 of them. 8, 9, it starts to really feel like too much grid for me, just on some deep level. But the grid felt like a decent choice for this panel. For this page, for the story of the page. A nice large panel of Sun's face, kind of a medium shot here. Cowboy shot, they call it, I guess. And then these 4 panels, 4 beats. There's a clear story from 1, 2, 3, 4. The first 2 are large and they stand out a little separately. The last 4 are 1, 2, 3, 4, clearly. So it works okay. And that's it for this week. One more drop in the bucket and one more diary entry. One step forward, and a step that I can look back on. Be the practice of your art. That's what I like to say. I've probably talked about that in prior videos, the idea of being your practice. This focus on the practice, what you actually do, the processes you engage in, the way you engage in them, and not simply the output, like how much you're drawing, or the schedule, like being scheduled or disciplined about it, or how productive you are, or how much you learn and improve. Like it's a different focus. So I encourage people to be their practice. And that's what I try to do. I'll see you next week.